and welcome to another edition of History After Hours podcast. This is Season 3, Episode 11. My name is Kevin Pumphrey, and with me is...
I'm Ron Franklin.
And we're going to discuss a few big things that are going on in the news, and who knows what else we'll get into. But today is November the...
16th.
And you can find us all over the internet now on SoundCloud or YouTube or Facebook. You can just search History After Hours, and we're out there. We would appreciate you sharing this with people, and we're trying to educate folks and educate ourselves. We enjoy doing this. So, what else? First thing on the list.
All right.
Let's talk about sexual abuse.
Let's. Okay.
Because everybody else is.
Yeah. It's everywhere. You know, I guess this is just stupid male perspective. I didn't realize how prevalent this was. But seems like every female that I've talked to, including my wife and daughter, and they're like, "Oh yeah, it's everywhere." I'm like, how do we not see this when it's? Is it because there's this culture of just hush it up, and that's the way it's been for so long, and people just don't talk about it, or they're threatened in male-dominated society? But I was really stunned, and you've got all these allegations coming out against so many people, ruining their careers, and rightfully so, by the way. But just, I mean, entertainers and politicians and other teachers, I've seen in the news just recently, you know, the harassment going back around. It's crazy. I really am stunned, and I guess that's just me being stupid.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think as guys as well, sexual assault, like if a girl sexually assaults a guy, like in just a playful way even, nobody really takes that serious. I mean, I don't think it's as big of a deal really even, you know, because that happens probably more than you think. In various forms, I'm sure. Well,
okay, so just take that thought. Like, where does it cross over? And we need to have, like, when we have other, like in future podcasts, we need to delve into this more when we have female guests. And so they can sort of tell us, like, where do you actually cross that line? Because you just said if a girl is kind of playing around with a guy, and would those same gestures, or those same actions, or those same attitudes be transformed into like a potential assault case if a guy was doing the same thing to a girl? Is there an interesting? Does it change depending on which gender is actually doing the same actions, or is it assault no matter what? I mean, I'm
sure it's a case by case basis as well.
Yeah. But does intent matter?
Yeah, I mean, I think that always matters. I'm not sure as far as like what's considered, you know, where the line is between being whatever.
Do like your mama said, keep your hands to yourself. Like, that's a good rule.
That's a pretty good rule. I think that could be well. I do have some stats here.
Okay.
And so I'm kind of looking. And I got some charts and graphs, and I went on different websites and found some pretty good ones. Some of them produced by the government. How often does sexual assault occur? And it's actually...
is that just in the United States?
Yeah, in the United States, sexual violence has fallen by more than half since 1993.
Is that just because people are not reporting it, though? I mean, I wonder about...
Well, there's another stat that says approximately, and I don't know how they get this number, 30% of sexual assault cases are reported to authorities.
How do you know what I saw somebody the other day say, well, you know, 80% of the sexual assault cases are never reported. How do you come up with that statistic?
I know. And I don't know how that they do that, but, you know, we had this Me Too craze going on, hashtag Me Too, which girls are coming out and saying, I was also sexually assaulted. Most of the time they're not listing who they are. And so here's another thing is, if you're going to hashtag Me Too, should you out these people?
Yeah, I wonder, yeah.
You know, I mean, like, you know, I heard somebody say, I don't want you to hashtag Me Too unless you're going to tell me who sexually assaulted you.
Yeah, why wouldn't you?
Don't just, right. Yeah, what's the, you know, there's no downfall. I mean, obviously it could ruin a family, career, and things like that. It could be bad for the person who did it, but that's kind of...
Is this kind of like a purge, you think, going on for just predatory behavior that needs to have happened a long time ago, and now all of a sudden it's come to the forefront, and so we're dealing with it when we should have been dealing with it a long time ago?
Yeah, and I think millions of women quietly dealt with it themselves. You know, they might have got assaulted 15 years ago, and for 15 years they just carried this. And then now seeing other women come out, it gives them the motivation, or at least there's power in numbers.
Yeah, right? I get that. But so back to the thing, but should they out those people, though? To me, it seems like you should.
I want to know.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to know if you're going to hashtag Me Too. I want to know, who these people are. Obviously, sexual offenders is a big deal. You can get, you get pinpointed, and you ever looked at one of those maps?
Oh, dude, that's scary.
They're
Yeah.
everywhere.
Yeah, the people who have to report to the agencies.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
In
my
your
goodness.
neighborhood. Yeah, there's websites you can go to, and I can't think of them right off, but you can find out who the people in your neighborhood are and what they've done and whether you should be concerned or not.
Well, what's surprising is with this all in the media and the news, and we're exposed to it, and the Weinstein thing, and now the Moore thing.
What about the stuff in Congress? Have you seen that? Because several, I don't know if it's senators or House members who've come out and said that that they're challenging the rules because sexual assault cases or charges that have been brought up, allegations that have been brought up against members of Congress, the rules that they've got in place to deal with that are really dysfunctional. And now that people are knowing that, they're going to start trying to change that. The idea is that if you're going to bring an accusation, you've got to go through like a mandatory counseling phase. Then you've got to sign a non-disclosure act. And then if there's a settlement, guess who pays for it? Not the offending party. Freaking taxpayers pay for it. Did you realize that?
Oh, my goodness.
And I think it was like, I'd have to look at the numbers now, but it was several $1 million in the past so many years that have been paid out settling sexual assault or sexual misconduct accusations in the House of Representatives. I don't know about Senate, but that's ridiculous.
That is
we would have
ridiculous.
to pay for somebody else's misconduct.
Yeah.
And they get to keep their job because there's a non-disclosure act. They're fixing to change that, son, and they need to because if you're going to talk about drain the swamp, then by God, let's get to it.
Yeah, well, remember Bill O'Reilly, $30 million settlement over sexual assault? I mean, this has been going on. It slowly seemed like it was last year or the year before that some of this was reported. It slowly started coming out that these more and more people that are in the public eye. And then when, is it Weinstein?
Weinstein, yeah.
When his thing happened, that seems like when it really, and then you had Kevin Spacey, you had, and now with this Moore guy. So with it everywhere, you think that it's worse than ever, but it actually says here.
Well, Cosby.
Oh yeah, Cosby.
That's.
It says the rate of sexual assault and rape has fallen 63% since 1993. Do you think that has to do with technology? I don't think human beings have changed
I'm still
much.
concerned about that graph because how do you? I said, is it? I mean, and I hope that that's true, right? Hopefully
Right.
that's not that it's not a growing trend. That it's actually getting that you have less people doing stupid things.
This
like
comes
that.
from the National Sexual Assault Hotline.
Yeah.
So I guess they
so it's just,
track
but
it
it's
that
just
way.
people who are reporting, and so they're seeing fewer people reporting. But that could be. That doesn't mean it's not happening. It just means that maybe the reporting is less. That's
Yeah.
where I'm concerned that statistic may be misleading. I
And
would
some
have
of
to
these
do-
might be.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you something else we never talk about is prison. These
Oh.
sexual assaults that happen in prison are worse than any other place
Oh.
in America. And that
Male
makes,
and female.
Yes, but I mean primarily male, just probably because of numbers.
Yeah.
But I think it's primarily male. But 1 out of every 6 American women has been the victim of an attempted or completed rape
1 in 6.
in her lifetime.
Wow.
1 out of 6 attempted rape or completed rape. Now, once again, these numbers might be skewed to some degree.
Yeah, but even if that's close to the real number, that's disturbing. And I'm disturbed that I didn't know how bad it has been. Right. I've never encountered
1
anything
out of
like that in my
6,
own
that
personal
sounds
life,
crazy.
and so I don't. It's weird to me that it's happening at all, but that the rate is that.
So if
high.
you think of 1 out of 6, just think of all the women that
Think
you
about
know.
six women in your family that you know.
Right.
One of them at least has dealt with something seriously like this. The statistically, I mean, that's
18,900 military cases.
Huh.
9 out of every 10 victims of rape are female. So, okay, well, obviously this is a big deal. I mean, this is something that needs to be addressed, I guess, and it is being addressed. And of course now with all the social media and TV, and it's everywhere. So, now, let's shift gears. If you think politically, we talk a lot about Trump, we talk about Bill Clinton.
right.
Let's talk about the Roy Moore.
Okay.
Okay, so he has just been elected.
Well, he won the special election.
Okay.
The back
The
up on the
seat.
story. Okay, so when Jeff Sessions became Attorney General, he vacated his Senate seat. So now the Republicans they had a special runoff between a couple of candidates, and Moore won that special election. Now he has to run off against a Democratic opponent to actually take the full seat in the Senate.
Okay.
But because these allegations have now come out, there's a lot of people who are, well, at first nobody was saying much about it, and then they just kept coming and kept coming and kept coming. And this one girl, she was like, I was 14, and he was trying to, he assaulted me, and he was trying to, potentially rape her, she said. And then there's been more people coming out. It seems like every day there's like another couple that have come out and said similar things. And then, which is interesting, in the middle of denying this on Hannity's program the other day, Hannity straight up asked him, have you ever dated teenage girls? And he's like, well, I can't say that I haven't, but at the same time, I'm paraphrasing a little bit,
right.
But I've never done those things, and so I can't really remember. It was this weird sort of not really denying it, but not stepping into it totally either. But there are people who, I saw this is weird. Even if he's possibly a pedophile, there are people in Alabama who are like, we'll vote for him because I would rather vote for that dude as a pedophile than to vote for a Democrat. And I'm like, really? Are we that divisive in our politics that you would pick someone who has, because then they sort of equate, well, everybody's right and all the politicians are bad and all of them are swampers. Mm-hmm. And that's not true, right?
Right.
I always hear them say things like, well, what about Clinton? Yeah, well, Clinton should have been prosecuted for his assault. Yeah. That's true. That does not excuse this guy's behavior. Like this one time, again, you go back to what you said, case by case basis, and I think that's a real thing that needs to be looked at because you can do the what ifs all day long. Well, what about them and what about them and what about these guys? Yeah, all that's bad. I agree. And just because so and so got away with it doesn't mean everybody should get away with it. I mean, is that really where they're going with that? That's just stupid. So we'll see what happens with Moore. He has a lot of people, but I read today that even Hannity, who is like hardcore trumpeter, right? Like he's like the voice box for that sort of mentality of supporting the president, supporting sort of far right leaning commentary and whatever. Even he today came out and was like, yeah, that dude is like, I don't think I can support him. So even that shit.
Will this hurt the Republican Party or specifically the right? Because one of the differences I've seen and I've heard other people comment on is when left leaning people like Weinstein and Kevin Spacey and people like that, the left immediately says, yeah, send them to jail. We don't. Now that some of these Republicans have been charged,
I think that they have to be careful.
Yeah, I mean, because they're defending these people.
Well, let's go about this too, because this is something that needs to be talked about. Like, Moore has not been officially charged with any crime.
That's true.
He's not been. There's no adjudication. He's not gone off and tried to plead his case to a judge or a jury, and he's not been convicted certainly. And so that has to be taken into consideration. There's a preponderance of voices coming out against him, and that sort of increases the probability that maybe there was some sort of misconduct. But at the same time, it has not been proven in court, and you in this country, regardless of what you've been accused of, have the right to, at least not, public opinion is one thing, but as far as the court system go, you are innocent until proven guilty, and they haven't proven anything yet, just allegations. So we have to be careful with that. We don't want to set some sort of weird precedent where we automatically lynch somebody because somebody stepped out and said, well, because
politics is different than other
it's
realms.
Ugly. And part of his defense that he's been saying when he does talk about this is that I'm being set up. This is a conspiracy against me from the liberals on the left, and whatever. And which, I mean, could that be true? Yeah, I guess it could be true, and that needs to be looked at. So,
as this increases and does this come back to haunt Trump with him admitting on that bus that he sexual assault? Remember the bus tape that came out? It didn't seem to really hurt his.
I don't think he really admitted. He admitted that he said things, but he didn't. And
right.
He admitted that he had done things in the past, but he didn't admit that it was assault.
Right.
So he said it's locker room talk and yada yada. So and it was dismissed basically as that. But then people ignored that, and he's now president. Even though there was apparently some sort of pattern of behavior that we would find disturbing. But again, it hadn't been proven in a court of law, so it's all allegations up to that point.
And he's had several allegations out against him.
I just, like I said, that we're walking a weird line here. And if someone has, let's go back to the Moore thing. If it's proven that he did these things, he's definitely unfit to serve. But just the allegations themselves doesn't necessarily make it true that he needs to step down. But I've seen people like Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell come out and go, well, he probably needs, for the good of the party, probably needs to step aside until we get this all sorted out. Which I think that's a valid thing for them to say, in spite of the fact.
McConnell even floated Sessions.
Yeah,
Did
right.
you hear
Go
that?
back, yeah. So in spite of the fact that he may be innocent, and we can presume that until it goes to court, if it ever does, at the same time, public opinion does matter, and this, even if it's a smear campaign, has tainted him and can then put a bad light on the Republicans who either don't talk about it or refuse to condemn him or ask him to step down. So I think that's part of what we're seeing is that there's so much negativity and so many people have come out against him. This sort of you know, there's this almost a trend now for people to go, well, he was this and he was that, and now all these folks are coming out of the woodwork, which is fine. That's their prerogative, and they should. If he's done this, go out and say that. But at the same time, you know, I think he's got to figure out that maybe his brand, regardless of his guilt or innocence, has now been skewed, and it might be better for him to step away from this. Let's deal with these allegations, get them cleared up if they can be cleared up, and they can be one way or the other, I suppose, right, through courts. Yeah. And then if he's innocent, then go back and do whatever you do. But right now, you're kind of a blister. It's rubbing, it's rubbing, and it's painful. And so I think that they're going to try to get him to step aside, and we'll see if he does. Like, he's been pretty defiant so far. And then you get Bannon, who supports him, who's been out there saying, well, you know, don't step away. You know, you're the guy. Don't, you know, hold your ground against the swamp and all that. So
I do think the magnifying glass we've placed on sexual abuse and rape culture that we've had now, what they're talking about, I think that's ultimately going to be good for our civilization, our society. I think moving forward. I mean, listen to this stat.
Okay.
The estimated number of the percentage of perpetrators of sexual violence that walk free, 99%. 99% of the people, they usually settle out of court. That's not reported. Yeah. It's a husband, it's a friend. Most of this kind of stuff happens.
Have you ever heard somebody say, you brought up the husband thing. I heard somebody say one time, and I can't think of where this was. I don't know if it was on a show or a documentary or something. And the guy was like, well, I can't be a rapist because I'm married to her. Like that. Are there people who actually hold that belief?
Maybe. I don't know.
That's scary.
That is scary. But I think this is probably a natural progression for us to get rid of this. Yeah. Because it has been horrific.
It needs to be purged.
Yeah. Listen to this. 94% of women who experience PTSD. If it says after directly being raped. So that's
any kind of assault, I would assume, especially at a certain age, would cause that kind of trauma with PTSD type symptoms or actual, full out. Mm-hmm. That's wow.
Yeah, and the total amount of money rape cost victims every year in the U.S., excluding child sexual abuse, $127 billion. So that goes back to the.
So all right. So how do you fix a culture that's sort of seen this as no big deal here? I mean, unless it's witnessed, and you see all these things that happen in private. But if you catch somebody raping somebody, obviously that's going to be, oh my God, that guy, and horrible, and you go take him off to jail and send him to prison. But so many of those things either aren't reported, or they're underreported, or they're laughed off as locker room talk, and how do we get past that machismo sort of attitude that I'm a dude and I'm entitled, and really get to the point where we educate young men about how the proper way to treat one another is. Do you think that media has any responsibility in that? Because if you watch lots of media or you listen to certain types of music, there's a lot of, and I'm not blaming media for world
entertainment
problems, but entertainment in general really does. There's a lot of misogynistic sort of imagery and lyrics and things that are out there. And is it a reflection of the time we live in, or is it actually a kind of a driving force, or both? Or is it a critique of who we are and as a culture?
Well, unfortunately, the entertainment business is a profit business, and sex sells, and it always has. So I don't know how we get rid of that.
What about? Because I've had this conversation in a college class I was in. Women who choose, or men who choose to exploit themselves. Mm-hmm. Is it exploitation? I use that word, but is it exploitation if you're doing it and selling an image, or, like I think about
the oldest profession.
Yeah, well, no, I don't mean like prostitution, because oftentimes those people are being forced into that, right? Yeah. But I mean, like, somebody who appears in adult films, if they do that by choice, is that promulgating this culture of disrespect towards women or sexuality just in general? Or is it an expression of the freedoms that we have, and you have the right to do that? It's your body. You wear what you want, and you go where you want, and you act the way you want. where do you? I don't know. Like that gets tricky too, right?
Yeah, I mean, everybody has their own moral code, I guess, that they can deal with. Look, if that's your thing and you're okay with that, promoting that to society, you should also be willing to teach your kids that same thing. The problem, I think, is a lot of people that are in that business, the pornography business or strip clubs or whatever, if they have children, I guarantee you they're going to try to shield them from all that.
Yeah.
Which means you're doing something that you don't really think is good. Maybe they're doing it for money. Maybe they're like there's all sorts of reasons that could justify it. But that's a very difficult. I don't know. I mean,
how do you? I don't know. How do you rationalize being an object and then arguing about objectification?
Right. And obviously we have these reality TV stars and stuff. They want to be objects. I mean, that's why, we've talked about this before. Remember when a sex tape was leaked, it would ruin you.
Now it makes you famous.
And now it makes you famous.
Yeah.
And so it has shifted quite a bit, I think.
So what about, so you said, what about assault the other way though? Like that's, are there any statistics on that? Because I know that, again, I think about what you said with the Kevin Spacey thing. Like those are young men that he's attacked.
Yeah, now that's apparently,
allegedly.
When you start talking about children, teenagers, that's to me a whole different category that needs to be discussed. Obviously, the Catholic Church has had their public disgrace with a lot of that. That definitely is something that needs to be. But I think of that children quite a bit different than I think of adults. I think this thing I was reading actually separates it into those categories. And I don't know exactly where that line would be drawn. That, children are, their frontal lobe is not developed. They don't know what's going on. They got hormones that are going crazy.
Isn't that a huge part of the problem with the whole, again, I go back to the Roy Moore thing. If he's dealing with 14, 15, 16-year-olds and he's in his 30s, like obviously they can't process the same way that you do as an adult, and there's a lot of leeway, especially if you're a professional adult, to keep them quiet. And he may,
intimidation.
Again, if that's really what happened, like that guy's got to step down and go away.
Yeah, and like you said, if there's enough allegations, even if they don't prove anything, and he's lost public confidence, I think, because this is, being a politician, being elected is a privilege. It should be looked at as I'm serving the people. And if you're going to cause too much, if half the country is going to reject you, what are you doing? I understand you've got maybe your core people in Alabama that support you.
Let's say that he is elected, and now
he can do something else.
How do you associate yourself as a senator, male or female, with someone who's still standing under those allegations? Can you work with them closely? And what happens if they do go down? Does that then damage what you're trying to accomplish? And because you've been associated with them now, politics is all about association, right? And you want to have positive associations with people. And if this guy comes in, let's say he does win this election and gets in, I bet that people would hesitate to be in conjunction with him in any way.
That's
because
kind
they're
of
afraid of
the
what
stigma.
might happen. Yeah, right.
I don't want to work with him because.
Sure.
Well, think about and this is an extreme case, but when O.J. Simpson was acquitted of murder, it's not like he could just go, okay, good, I'm proven innocent. Now I'm going to go be a movie star again. Or
that court of public opinion still does matter.
Yeah, I think it still does, especially in the day when, we have anonymous internet. Could you imagine if we had the internet on the scale we do today when the O.J. Simpson trial was going on, what people, just the horrendous stuff that they say?
Yeah.
And we've talked about that before, like censoring Twitter, and I don't want to go down that road, but these people need to be called out. But I don't like the hashtag Me Too, and then that's where you leave it. You just say, yes, I was sexually assaulted. Don't add to the fire unless you have a name.
That in a weird way could, and you know what, that could be a platform, and I'm not saying it is, I'm saying it could be a platform for other people to get attention because, it happened to me. But if you're not willing to step up and say it was this person and I want to see, follow through with that. Most states don't have, I think I'm right about this. Most states don't have a statute of limitation on sexual assault. And if they do, somebody can correct me on that, but I hope that they don't, and you could bring charges against people, decades later if need be. Oh, I know what I was going to say. There was something I was thinking a while ago. One of the things, again, back to the Moore thing, people who were defending him, I heard a woman in Alabama say, well, if this happened to this woman, then I just can't believe it because she, why in the world would she wait 30 years or 40 years to come forward? Well, again, talking with my wife about this, because, she's had lots of friends and she knows people who've gone through things. it's not unusual apparently for women who were assaulted as, let's say, a young girl or a teenager to never speak about that to anybody, even their closest friends, even their closest relatives or their spouses. They might not ever talk about that. So for that woman to say, well, I can't believe that she has to be lying because why would she wait 40 years to bring it up? She may have not been able to deal with it up until that. Yeah, there's all kinds of reasons why she would not have.
There's psychological things that can happen.
That's a stupid thing for someone to say. I discount what she says because it's been so long. You need to shut up.
And and listen, you're putting yourself in the spotlight. Not many people want to be known for this.
Yeah.
A woman coming out and publicly charging or saying something about a public figure. Now you're in the spotlight.
You're going to get all that negative stuff that you've been trying to avoid. You've already gone through a negative experience, and now you're going to face that kind of overwhelming potential rejection and vilification. So
besides the fact you're a teenager when it happened, maybe, and you just want to block it out, you're trying to move on with your life, because now you're the center of a media storm for this reason. I know. Sure. So it'll work itself out. I'm sure.
Let's do this. Let's encourage anybody who's listening. If you've been the victim of any kind of assault or harassment, you should come forward.
Yeah.
Please, let's try to help be a positive force here and say, look,
There is a national sexual assault hotline. It's 1-800-656-HOPE. And there's people out there that can offer support without you publicly having to do anything. Right. So, that would be definitely encouraged.
And if absolutely nothing else, maybe some counseling services, because if there is PTSD, those are feelings that need to be dealt with instead of repressed.
Yeah. Okay, let's switch gears briefly and let's talk about the GOP is trying to push through, finally, a major piece of legislation. They tried, as you remember, months ago to pass a repeal and replace new health care.
Right.
Now they're trying to tax the Republican tax plan, which is really, I think, what most of the big shots wanted. This is what they're going to hang their hat on. I mean, I think Paul Ryan, this was, of course, his major thing was to redo the tax code.
Yeah, he's been on that for a while.
And it looks like a pretty big cut. I've got some.
Now are you looking at the House version or the Senate version?
This is the House version that came out when they first published this. I think I want to say this was done November 2nd is when they came out with the first version of this. So there's been changes probably to it.
They're fairly similar though, aren't they? As far as who's going to get cuts and who's going to get benefits.
Yeah, it's a cut pretty much across the board. More than 480,050 is the current rate is 39.6, and it'll stay 39.6, more than $1 million proposed rate. So I don't know if that's income taxed. I don't know, but it's supposed to be a pretty. And some of the reading I've done on it, there's going to be a larger child credit, which might help some people that are in that lower income bracket.
I think the idea about reducing the number of brackets to simplify the code that's not a problem for a lot of folks. I think what some people have criticized is the massive cuts for corporate rates, and we do understand too that income tax and payroll taxes are two separate things, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so I don't know how many people understand that, but how do you? Okay, my problem is overall, how do you pay for those tax cuts? Because the idea that's been floated every time we go through a major tax cut, especially for the upper echelon, is that we'll make up the difference through growth. Economic growth is going to be the magic bullet to seal the deal here, so that we can pay for these things in the long run. We won't actually add to the deficit and the overall debt. But that's never come true. And any of the moderate economic analysts I've ever listened to said that this is a complete fallacy, and that it's actually going to end up, because you're going to cut all this revenue, but you're not going to cut your spending. Matter of fact, we're amping up spending,
this was Reaganomics, right? This was Reagan in the 80s. We're going to cut taxes, and
but
we're
all
going
that does
is
create
spending.
Massive debt over the long haul, because the growth has never been, let me say it that way, has never been strong enough to eradicate the losses from the revenue. And so now what all that falls upon then is on middle class payers, and that's just the way that works. Middle class folks who are making too much money to get some of the benefits that lower end groups get, and not making enough to get some of the things that the upper class gets. And so these guys end up getting crushed, and you can push that all the way up to like $1 million. I think that's sort of considered top end in middle class, and that's about right, isn't it? And so, like those, you're going to get that, and if not through income tax, but through other things, like other revenue can be generated through excise taxes or what things like that. So it's not just income tax, but what it is, any statistic I've ever found that's not biased on one side or the other, actually shows that as you decrease expenditures, revenue collected from your corporate groups and all that, that you end up automatically trying to draw that from the middle group because we're the largest group, and we don't have a whole lot of pushback because we can't necessarily fight it like other groups can.
How many years since World War II has our country actually ran a profit to some degree? We took the taxes in, we took all this money in, we spent this amount, and we actually ran a profit. I want to say there was 2 years under Bill Clinton, and that's it.
Well, we balanced the budget, but that's not the same thing as having.
Well, that's true.
We weren't completely out of our debt.
Well, yeah, we've been in debt since
we were founded.
Right.
Almost, yeah.
The only president that cleared our debt was Jackson, and he just did it because he killed the national bank and distributed it back to the states. So,
sure.
But yeah, we've had a debt, and it's of course out of control. I don't want the government to raise my taxes.
You know what? The only other option, though, rather than push it off onto middle class, is to raise revenue through treasury bonds. And all you're doing there is selling that to other countries, which we already do. But people complain about the idea that, well, China owns so much of our debt. Yeah, guess what? They're going to own more of it when we start to have to pick up revenue in other ways. And it will be good for corporations. I get that, and they could hire. But what we've seen in the past couple of decades,
or they keep a huge bonus.
Right. Well, yeah, and I'll give you a great example. I saw this today. Toys R Us, one of the major companies in this country at one time, is bankrupt, and yet they were going to give their CEOs $16 million in bonuses.
Oh yeah.
And so that's okay. So
this reminds me of 2007. When all those businesses, the mortgage companies were going, but yet they still gave their people a bonus. Nobody went to jail.
Yeah, that was awesome. Yeah, sure. So, you can't, on one hand, sure, if they're taking that money and they're putting it back into their businesses and they're hiring people and they're doing good things with, research and development, and we got new products coming out, and we're stronger with our domestic manufacturing or whatever it is we're doing, and we can then sell that across our country and then overseas. That's fantastic. But if you're hoarding that money now that you've got those breaks, and you're just handing it to a few people at the top through bonuses and whatnot, is not what that's not trickle down. That is not trickle down. That's stay where it is. That's hoarding.
The Republicans will sell this the way they've always sold tax cuts. Well, we're going to make things so much more efficient. We're going to save money on the back end.
Right.
We're going to make this tax code simple. We're going to close all these loopholes, whatever that is. We're going to keep billionaires from having offshore accounts, non-taxable accounts. Okay, that's what they say every time. Mm-hmm. My thing is, I don't think this will ever work unless they start either cutting into defense spending, which I don't think will do that as long as we're in war.
No, that's not going to happen.
Or we got to get rid of the social programs, the Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, healthcare.
You know what's interesting? If we went to a universal healthcare system, do you know that we could eliminate Social Security, Medicaid, and Medicare?
I know.
You could get rid of all of those at the same time and have a universal healthcare system. Now you don't have to worry about, right? Well, the whole reason for Medicare and Medicaid
that's right.
is to help people pay for their prescriptions and their doctor's visits. Yeah. And if we had a system like you could eliminate. Think about that. That is those three things right there are the as in conjunction with the military spending, are the largest things that we have to pay for out of our budget year to year.
Yeah.
But people go, well, you can't touch the Social Security. Well, maybe you can't. We can't touch Medicaid. Well, maybe you can't. But we sure don't want universal health care. Dude, we'd be saving money in the long run if we actually went to that kind of system.
Maybe,
because you could curb costs. You're already spending that money. You're already spending more.
It on,
and matter of fact, you're spending more than you've got. You could rein all that in through a better system and then fix people. Don't you love people who say, I can't stand a single payer system, but don't touch my Medicare?
Oh, yeah. Say,
what?
Yeah, Medicare for all.
What?
Well, and also just think about preventative health. Mm-hmm. Like people can't go to the doctor because they can't afford it, so they wait around. If you had universal health care, they could go and we could prevent tons and tons of stuff that could have. People need these much needed surgeries. Well, they can't have the surgery. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to spend millions of dollars on prescription drugs to, alleviate my pain. Instead, if they had the money to go to the surgery, you save all that money on the back end. I don't know. I mean, it's working for a lot of countries, you know.
Well, I don't know. We think about corporate America, though, and this kind of ties back in with that. Because don't you realize how many billions of dollars that corporations like pharmaceuticals make off of the fact that we don't have a universal healthcare system? And so if we're ever going to cut their revenues, which they're going to continue to spend lots of lobbyists' money to keep that from happening, but that a single payer system and a price control, a real price control, and I'm not talking about this Obamacare crap that said, well, we're going to bring down cost by the government picking up the tab and if you haven't controlled cost, you've just supplemented and allowed. I mean, their rates are going to continue to raise.
Yeah.
The pharmaceutical, the cost of medication has continued to climb, and the idea that Obamacare, the thing that really irked me about it was that all it was a filter to bring more money to corporations. Like, you weren't actually reducing rates for people. So a true single payer system would curb costs, which would then curb profits for corporations like pharmaceutical companies, and they would throw a fit.
Well, I think Obama knew, and he had these smart dudes around him. I think he knew it wasn't going to work. But I heard him say, I didn't hear him say, but I heard a report that he said, and I don't know if this is true, but he said, look, this isn't going to work. It's not a long-term solution. But once we pass and they give it to the people, when millions of people sign up for this, they won't be able to take it away from them. And of course, they're trying. Yeah. He said this was the first step in getting where he's probably, I'm sure.
There's got to be a better system, though. It's not benefiting people. But in the long run, and like I said, the corporations will be the ones who will lose out. And that's part of the holdup, I think. Will
it hurt the quality of care? Like, will doctors not be as good?
I don't know. Ask Japan and Britain and France and Finland and all that.
That's what they scare you with that.
It seems to be pretty good for them. And I've read statistics from them, not just our reporting, but their reporting on their own systems and their audits of them. And it's not this scary.
I heard Canadians talking about it on TV the other day. He goes, Americans think we sit in the hospital all day waiting for care. He says, it's not that bad. So I don't know where the truth is. I mean, I'm not experienced in that stuff. But okay, well, let's finish this up with something else. I came to you earlier today, and here's what got me to think about this. I'm talking about leading up to the Civil War, and there's a woman named Harriet Tubman.
Sure.
Who is unbelievable. Her life story. So she shakes off her own shackles of slavery, escapes to the north. And by the way, when you escape from slavery, it's not like you're just running off the property and going, all right, I'm done with that. Like, you're running hundreds of miles usually to escape. Then she willingly came back like 13 to 19 times, risking her life, saving her family, her friends, and saved anywhere around 300 slaves. Now, she's not on my wall of influence, but her symbolizing that slave resistance, the Underground Railroad, man. And then when the Civil War broke out, she became a spy for the Union Army. She even led a unit into battle, and I can't remember the name of where it happened. She was familiar with the area, so she was actually on the ship as they docked, and she's the one. And then she lived on. I think she died in, I want to say, 1913. She died the same year that Rosa Parks was born.
Oh, wow.
I don't know why I know that. But here's what I thought. We should make a really good movie out of her life. Like, that should be done. But I don't think there is a good movie about her. Now, there might be documentaries.
That's different, right?
So what I wanted you to come up with is 1, 2, 3 people that you can think of in history where there needs to be I'm not talking about a tiny little independent. I'm talking about a blockbuster.
Sure. Well, I'll tell you an event that I'm glad has just been made into a movie that I've been arguing for years should have been, and it's European, it's World War II. But this Dunkirk movie that came out recently.
Oh yeah, I haven't seen it yet.
Dude, that movie.
The Miracle at Dunkirk.
Right. That whole story is fascinating because it was improbable. The fact that you have soldiers, British and French soldiers, pinned up against the English Channel with German, the war machine, hounding them and strafing them, and then for Churchill to get on basically radio messaging to civilians saying, "Please help us. We don't have the manpower or the military might to stream people across. We got to save these guys." And people in their individual ships coming across. Like, you're talking about fishermen and yachtsmen, whatever you've got. And they're being bombed too. They're being strafed, and some of these guys are not going to make it through. But they saved most of those dudes off that beach.
Yeah, I want to see that.
That's an amazing thing. So I want to see that movie. I haven't, but for a long time I thought, well, that should be a thing. And so, okay, so you asked me, I had trouble with this because when I went looking for stories that I thought, or people that I thought would make a good movie, movies that I was like, well, they haven't made that. I would go look, and somewhere there's been a movie made about these people. And so,
Right.
but it's not an American sort of blockbuster, and that's kind of, I think, where I have to kind of go with it. There's a guy that we just got through teaching about in my pre-AP class, a guy in India who runs something called the Mughal Empire, and a guy named Akbar the First. Also, Akbar the Great. And the funny thing about it is when I teach this, we talk about his name, Akbar, actually means the Great. So we talk about Alexander the Great, we talk about Peter the Great, we talk about Catherine the Great. Like, here's a guy whose name is literally Great the Great, right? And how can you get better than that?
That's awesome.
So, yeah, and he was just this amazing ruler, massive military guy, controlled, India in a time when it had been going through tremendous political turmoil. And brought that back into something much more formidable and unified. So, and a good administrator, but he was tough, but he was fair. So I think that would be a good. I haven't seen a movie, sort of, an American production of a movie about him. I know there are movies about him.
Yeah, that's like Alexander the Great. There was a movie, Colin, whatever his name is, Farrell, maybe.
Yeah.
Was that his name? Anyhow, he starred in it, and it was okay. But I'd always thought Alexander the Great would be a good movie.
Yeah, it would be.
It was okay.
There would be two scary movies that would be
Rasputin?
or hardcore. Well, yeah, the Rasputin. Now there's a Rasputin sort of based movie. It's not. It's kind of cheesy. It's dated. But that would be a modern version of that would be good. But I was thinking about Vlad the Impaler, and I know there's one that's
Dracula,
fairly recent, but it's got a real Dracula spin to it. And I mean, just the real story about that guy. The real story in a dramatized version, I think would be epic.
Yeah, that dude was a monster.
Yeah, but he was also a hero to a lot of people.
Oh yeah.
I mean, he controlled territories and was on the front lines against the Ottoman Turks who were trying to take over parts of what's now modern day Romania. Like, this guy was really on edge, and his father was. They were part of this something called the Order of the Dracul, which is this Christian, basically militant group whose job it was to defend territories on the borderlands against the Islamic army. So that would be a cool story to see. Plus, did you get to that weird thing where he ends up impaling all these folks?
Oh yeah.
So he's a monster, but he's also a hero. That'd be kind of cool to watch a movie about that.
I heard he actually did drink blood of some of his
I
captors.
don't know. Yeah.
He said he had a disease that created an iron deficiency in him, and that made him want it. I don't know if that's
I don't
true.
know the truth behind that. We've heard things about him dipping bread in blood.
I know he had diplomats that came to see him from somewhere, and they refused to remove their hats, so they had them
nailed
to the head.
Yeah. And the other one that I was thinking, and again, this is one that we just got through studying, so it's kind of fresh in my mind. There's a guy named Timur, and he's known in the West as Tamerlane, and he's responsible. Like, we think about bad dudes in history, he's in my top 3.
Is he?
Yeah, because he's just this. It's a pretty monstrous, but it's it would be this epic saga about a guy coming out of the middle of nowhere, basically in modern day Uzbekistan, and then rolling out and taking over what had once been held by the Mongols, they had taken it from the Persians before them, and some of the other groups that come through, and actually destroys part of something called the Delhi Sultanate, which was trying to control northern India at that time. And this guy just rips through.
Is he the guy that stacked his prisoners of war while they were alive? And eventually the top, it's crushing all the people in the wall, and then he had them encased in brick.
Stacking people. Yes, he does that. And who is that? I know that he makes mountains, pyramids out of skulls. And I think maybe the wall thing is true too. So I'd have to look back on that. Yeah. But that would be, the struggle against somebody like that, or just to see that story played out again, because conflict is interesting.
There's so many, we're making these ridiculous movies. There's so many good history-based movies. Like
do we really need Daddy's Home 2?
Yeah, really. Although I'll probably watch
it. Make some sort of sweeping epic that has grandeur and emotions and people struggling to survive, and those kind of things are interesting to me.
Yeah. Harriet Tubman, I think, would be good.
Her story would be awesome. I really agree with you on that one.
Yeah, there's some other ones. There was one more that I thought of. General Pershing, Blackjack Pershing would be a good...
You're talking about Pershing in the World War I Pershing, or Pershing fighting off Pancho Villa Pershing?
Both. But, he was the mentor to our World War II greats. He was a mentor to 2 presidents eventually. Blackjack Pershing would be good. But there's so many, and then there's the lesser known. I'm thinking politics and leaders like you do immediately, but there's probably so many, lesser known people that stories, like Unbroken, the movie that came out with it,
Is there a good movie about Napoleon Bonaparte? I don't even know.
No, but that's another one. I don't know of one offhand that I would go watch, but
I'll tell you another one. Ooh, this is cool. Okay, African history. King named Mansa Musa. Actually,
I've heard of
Mansa is
Mansa.
king. That guy was
he the richest guy in the
arguably the richest man who ever lived. A guy who came out of West Africa and he converted to Islam and took the Hajj. He was on his way to Saudi Arabia. And every country he went through, he spent so much money so freely that he caused inflation everywhere he went.
Oh my goodness.
It's an amazing story. So I would like to see a story about that guy.
Yeah.
Movie.
Okay. Well, that's it. That's the podcast. This
right.
is season 3, episode, what did I say? 11?
11, yep.
And we will see you next time. Goodbye.